It's common knowledge by now that the Resident Evil fanbase is divided. One side prefers horror over action, and the other side prefers action over horror. But there was one RE title where all that division began. That title being Resident Evil 4. For better or for worse, RE4 has made a massive, long-lasting impact on the Resident Evil franchise. With the Resident Evil 4 remake steadily approaching, RE fans are waiting in anticipation to once again roundhouse kick the Las Plagas infected hordes, but this time looking better than ever. Yet, I can't help but feel like we might be witnessing deja vu. Real quick, I want to thank my good friend Jinpachi. Through our conversations over the years, we shared our views on Resident Evil. He's more of a die-hard fan than I am, and during our conversations, he picked up on a few things that I originally missed. But thanks to that, I was able to really consider how I feel about the series and the different paths it's taken over the years. Maybe one day, we can do a collaboration video on the topic. After Resident Evil 4's release on the GameCube, the bold new RE title wowed fans and brought new life into the Resident Evil franchise. It was clear by the glowing reviews and skyrocketing sales numbers that Capcom had something, and to ignore such success would have been foolish. A few years later, and Resident Evil 5 launched, starring the series' first survivor, Chris Redfield. Alongside him was series newcomer Sheva, who we may or may not see again. If so, she won't be alone. She'll have Resident Evil 0 star Billy to keep her company. RE5 continued where RE4 left off. It favored action over horror, and even though Resident Evil 5 performed well, it did have its detractors. Not everyone was a fan of the sunny Africa setting and its constant Michael Bay-esque action scenes, which is odd because apparently that's acceptable in a horror title. I guess that was the epitome of gut-wrenching terror. Backflips and roundhouse kicks really scream survival horror. But God forbid Chris repeatedly punches a boulder out of desperation while also pushing his weight on it. And then finally moving said boulder out of his way, all while trying to save Sheva from Triple Back's Wesker, mind you. But nope, too much action. Flipping over lasers definitely screams Resident Evil. It seems in our current culture, the exaggerated memes become reality. People wonder why the fanbase is so divided. Well, here you go. Deja vu is coming, and it's coming in the form of Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now, before I go any further, I'm not saying what to like or what not to like, nor am I saying what game to buy or not to buy. You should do whatever the hell you choose to. I just find it odd that RE fans will claim one game is true to the series while another game is not. Need an example? Here's one, Resident Evil 7. The game was being called an Amnesia clone, but if you actually played the game, you'll know it's far from it. If anything, RE7 resembles something like Condemned over Amnesia. Aside from the game being set in first person with a new protagonist and a new virus to deal with, Resident Evil 7 was something that RE4, 5, 6, and even 8 were not. A survival horror game. You know, something many fans wanted the series to return to. When you think about it, RE7 featuring a new protagonist made sense. After all, most of the established RE protagonists got the RE4 treatment, with backflips, roundhouse kicks, and German suplexes. Ethan Winters was fairly grounded in RE7, which makes sense considering Capcom wanted Resident Evil 7 to go back to basics. Let's look back at Resident Evil 1 Remake and Resident Evil 0, the two games that originally launched exclusively on GameCube and did not sell well, which makes sense considering the circumstances. The guys at Capcom actually thought putting those games on the fucking GameCube would have paid off well, a series mostly known for their PlayStation releases. Now if we look at Resident Evil 4, that game released exclusively on GameCube and was a big hit. But I wonder why. Why did Nintendo fans embrace this game over the others released on GameCube? I'm pretty sure for many RE fans that Resident Evil 4 was their first RE game, and was probably the first RE game many were actually able to complete. It's painstakingly obvious that RE4 was geared towards newcomers, so if you felt disappointed by the direction RE5 and 6 took, then thank your favorite Resident Evil game for that. Capcom had something good going on with Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 2 Remake. It seemed like Capcom had a winning formula. Fans were getting what they wanted. Resident Evil was back being survival horror. No more pseudo-action horror games, the series was going back to what brought them to the survival horror scene. Or so it seemed. Not long after the release of RE2 Remake, we got Resident Evil 3 Remake, which featured more action-packed scenarios, and when it was time to unveil the next main installment in the franchise, Capcom presented Resident Evil 8. It was set in a blistering cold village filled with werewolf-esque enemies and mutated humans. RE8 pulled inspiration from Resident Evil 4, and it shows. Not only that, but Capcom said so themselves. The connection between the two titles go further than the contents in the game, but with those who sing the game's praises. It's no coincidence that RE4 fans were quick to embrace RE8 over 7. Seeing how action heavy Resident Evil 8 was, and how resources were managed in the game, such as the crafting system and the return of the traveling merchant. The positive reception to the original Resident Evil 4 is what got us RE5 and 6. That's not to say these games are terrible, far from it actually, but all three of those games lack survival horror, something that is crucial to the Resident Evil series. When the Resident Evil 4 Remake comes out, we can see the return of action horror Resident Evil games. Personally, I found Resident Evil 7 to be a great game to get the series back to where it needed to be. Sadly, Resident Evil 8 was a letdown for me. And once the RE4 Remake got announced, not that long after RE8's release, I understood what was happening. RE8 was getting us ready for the return of this. I know RE4 had moments of tension and uneasiness, most of it being only skin deep at best. However, with it came the flips and kicks, collecting gold bars for a wandering merchant, and a season finale anime-style fight with Krauser, thus resulting in the identity crisis that the Resident Evil series suffered for years after. And who's to say it won't happen again when Resident Evil 4 Remake goes flying off store shelves? You know, I can't put the blame solely on Capcom for Resident Evil going through an identity crisis. Yes, it was a huge mistake for them to have RE1 Remake and 0 be exclusive to GameCube. Most of the fanbase got into the series on PS1. but when Resident Evil 4 came to PS2, the fans made it clear to Capcom what they wanted from Resident Evil. I know all this probably sounds like I despise Resident Evil 4, but I don't. I just find it odd how so many people adored that game but take issue with some of the decisions made in RE5. Same goes for Resident Evil 7 and 8. To some, Resident Evil 7 doesn't feel like a RE title, but somehow RE8 does. Furthermore, while Resident Evil 4 is a good game, it can't be denied that it's the entry that's responsible for the series moving away from survival horror and closer towards action. Perhaps the Resident Evil fanbase is more confused than divided. For me, I enjoy both styles of RE games. Personally, I would rather see the mainline titles stick to survival horror and have the action horror be in the Revelations titles, instead of teasing us with a return to form. All this back and forth with the direction of the Resident Evil games can definitely get confusing. Hopefully we don't experience deja vu with the Resident Evil series. If we do, I hope the purists stay consistent with their stance. Will they jack off to the anime hero wearing a leather jacket with a MySpace scene kid circa 2008 hairstyle? Or will they shake their head at the sight of a Chad who works out in order to fight a superhuman freak that leaves him having to find a way to move a boulder out of his way to save his partner from falling into lava? Seeing how the original Resident Evil 4 made such an impact for the series, will the same happen with the remake? Who knows? All I know is that I want Resident Evil to be consistent. I don't want to see it go through another identity crisis and move away from its survival horror roots. And yeah, I'm sure RE4 Remake will be great. Hopefully Capcom can really give it that RE2 Remake treatment and gives us what Resident Evil is really about: survival horror. Now remake Code Veronica, you cowards.
Crisscross applesauce!
What? How did he? That's his signature move.